The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations for thousands of years. But on this day, the ancient hall echoed with laughter. Holographic projections of humanity's fleet rotated slowly above the central table, showing block steel warships covered in thick armor plates and heavy rail cannons that looked more like relics from an industrial age than vessels belonging to a species that had recently entered interstellar space. And across the circular chamber, alien delegates leaned toward one another, whispering jokes while High Arbiter Vrax observed the display with thinly disguised amusement, because the human ships lacked the elegant curves and shimmering energy shields that marked advanced galactic technology, and instead resembled floating fortresses built for brute force rather than refinement, while one delegate even compared them to mining vessels armed with cannons, causing another wave of laughter to ripple through the chamber. And at the far end of the hall, the human delegation remained silent as Admiral Adrian Cole stood beside Dr. Maya Chun, watching the projection of Earth's so-called primitive fleet without reacting, while the council analysts continued presenting their report, explaining that the human vessels relied on thick armor and kinetic weaponry instead of sophisticated plasma arrays or phase shields, and therefore posed minimal threat to any major galactic power. But as the laughter faded, one voice broke the mood when Advisor Kelrith quietly asked a question that none of the others had considered, because he pointed out that humans had fought wars for thousands of years under far harsher conditions than most spacefaring species and civilizations that survived. Such histories rarely built technology without purpose yet. Before he could continue, the Arbiter dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand, declaring that humanity's fleet represented little more than an outdated military philosophy carried into space. And as the chamber erupted in renewed amusement, the massive holographic map of human territory Ted unexpectedly revealing thousands of faint signals appearing at the outer edge of the system well deep beneath Earth's oceans. Admiral Cole finally turned away from the council display and issued a calm order that would soon silence the entire galaxy. Captain Torres, bring the fleet online. Inside the Grand Chamber, the laughter slowly faded as the holographic map hovering above the council table flickered again and again, updating in real time, while small unidentified signals appeared across the outer perimeter of human space. At first, only a few scattered readings that the council technicians dismissed as sensor ghosts, but the numbers kept growing until dozens became hundreds and hundreds became thousands, causing the analysts operating the chamber consoles to lean closer to their instruments, while High Arbiter Vrax's amusement began to fade because the signals were not random distortions, but organized formations moving with synchronized vectors that suggested fleet maneuvering. And yet the council database insisted that humanity possessed fewer than 300 operational warships, according to the intelligence reports gathered during their probationary observation period, while across the chamber, Admiral Adrian Cole remained silent, his posture calm and still, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment, while Dr. Maya Chun quietly studied the council's reaction and whispered only one sentence: "They're starting to see it," as the holographic projection zoomed outward, revealing the edge of human territory, where the unknown signals were multiplying faster than the analysts could catalog them, and the chamber filled with a low murmur of confusion, while Advisor Kelrith watched the display with a tightening expression, because the pattern unfolding on the map did not resemble the chaotic movement of a newly veered species, but the deliberate positioning of a military force preparing for a strategic demonstration. And deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, inside one of Earth's hidden command complexes, Captain Elena Torres stood on the bridge of a massive subterranean command carrier, surrounded by holographic tactical displays, showing the same star map that now terrified the Galactic Council. And as the final encrypted confirmation codes appeared across her screen, she placed her hand calmly on the command console and spoke with quiet certainty. "All fleets report ready, Admiral. Awaiting authorization." Back in the chamber, one of the council technicians finally broke the silence with a strained voice as he reported that the unknown signals were not approaching human territory, but emerging from within it, which made the situation far worse because it meant the fleets had already been positioned inside dozens of systems long before the council's sensors had ever detected them while the holographic display continued updating, showing massive clusters of ships appearing from hidden shipyards buried high, side asteroid belts, frozen gas giants, and hollowed moons throughout human-controlled space, each cluster forming precise military formations that began slowly drifting toward the galactic trade corridors. And as the scale of the movement became clear, the murmuring in the chamber grew louder because the analysts had already counted more than 2,000 vessels, and the numbers were still climbing, while High Arbiter Vrax demanded an explanation from the intelligence division that had monitored humanity for decades. But the officers had none to give because every report they possessed insisted that Earth lacked the industrial capacity to produce fleets on such a scale, and yet the growing constellation of signals on the map told a completely different story. While Adrian Cole finally stepped forward toward the council table and spoke for the first time since the hearing began, his voice steady and controlled. "You asked why our ships look primitive. The answer is simple." As the chamber turned silent again, waiting for him to continue, while the holographic display expanded outward, revealing another wave of signals appearing simultaneously across multiple star systems, bringing the count past 4,000 ships. While Cole finished his sentence calmly, "Because they were never meant to impress you." Advisor Kelrith leaned forward, studying the tactical patterns forming on the map, and the realization struck him before anyone else in the chamber. Because the positioning of the fleets was not random nor defensive, but arranged in enormous concentric arcs surrounding the central galactic trade lanes, which meant humanity had quietly prepared the ability to control the movement of nearly every major civilization within the Orion Arm, while the Council's strategic advisors began rapidly calculating possible outcomes, and the projections appearing on their screens made several delegates visibly recoil, because if the human fleets continued deploying at the current rate, they would soon possess the largest concentrated military force the galaxy had ever recorded. While Dr. Maya Chun quietly activated a secondary projection, showing images of Earth's shipyards, hidden beneath oceans, carved into asteroids, and concealed within gas giant atmospheres, revealing decades of industrial expansion that the Council had completely failed to detect. Because every installation had been designed to appear as civilian infrastructure or mining operations when scanned from orbit. Wow, Chun explained with calm precision. "For 40 years you observed humanity and believed you understood our technology. But what you actually saw was only what we chose to show you." The chamber erupted into frantic conversation as the council delegates realized the scale of the deception that had just been revealed, while the holographic display continued counting new fleet signatures until the number passed 6,000 ships, each one appearing in disciplined formations that began slowly moving toward pre-assigned coordinates across the star map. While High Arbiter Vrax attempted to regain control of the hearing by demanding that Admiral Cole explain humanity's intentions, the human officer only folded his hands behind his back and studied the projections as if reviewing a long-prepared plan. While Advisor Kelrith spoke quietly again, his voice carrying a new tone of caution. "High Arbiter, these fleets are not mobilizing randomly. They are positioning themselves to surround every major hyperspace corridor leading to Council territory." And as the analysts confirmed his observation, the implications rippled through the chamber because it meant humanity had quietly constructed the ability to isolate entire regions of the galaxy in the event of conflict. While Captain Torres's voice echoed across Cole's private communicator, reporting the latest update. Fleet count now 7,900 ships and rising. Additional squadrons leaving the Europa shipyards. When the holographic counter finally crossed the threshold of 10,000 Vessels, the chamber fell completely silent because no civilization in recorded galactic history had ever deployed a fleet of that magnitude without months of visible preparation, and yet humanity had done it without triggering a single council warning system, while the vast network of human warships now stretched across dozens of systems, forming a defensive lattice that shimmered across the star map like a web of steel and fire. And Admiral Adrian Cole finally looked directly at High Arbiter Vrex before speaking the words that would echo across the entire council chamber. For 40 years you watched us build our future and assumed we were naive newcomers learning how the galaxy works. As the holographic map zoomed outward, showing the enormous human armada locking into final formation, while his voice remained calm but unmistakably firm. In reality, you were watching a species preparing for the day the galaxy decided to test us. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council had never been silent for this long, because the ancient hall was built for debate, conflict, negotiation, and power. But now every delegate sat frozen, staring at the holographic projection of 10,000 human warships, spread across dozens of systems, forming a massive lattice of steel and fire across the Orion Arm, while the council analysts struggled to process the data flooding their consoles because every new scan confirmed the same impossible reality. The fleets were real, fully operational, and strategically positioned across the most critical hyperspace corridors in the galaxy. Wow. High Arbiter Vrax slowly rose from his seat, attempting to regain control of the hearing, but the confidence he had displayed only minutes earlier had vanished as he stared at the tactical formations appearing across the star map, while Advisor Kelrith leaned closer to the projection, studying the deployment pattern, and the more he analyzed it, the more alarming the situation became, because the positioning of the fleets revealed something that none of the Council's intelligence divisions had ever predicted. Humanity had not simply built a large military force, they had built a system-wide strategic network capable of controlling the movement of fleets, trade routes, and supply lines across nearly half the galactic arm. And as the implications spread across the chamber, several delegates began quietly activating emergency communications to their home systems, only to discover that human fleets were already positioned near the most important transit gates that connected their territories to the rest of the galaxy. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, Captain Elena Torres stood on the command bridge of the command carrier, Aegis Prime, watching the same galactic map that now terrified the Council, but on her display every ship icon was highlighted in blue, showing the enormous scale of the human armada as thousands of vessels completed their deployment sequences, while engineering reports streamed across her console, confirming that the fleets hidden for decades inside asteroid shipyards, orbital construction rings, and EP space fabrication stations were now fully active and moving into their assigned sectors. Wow. Admiral Adrian Cole's voice came through the encrypted command channel, calm, steady, and completely focused. Status report, Captain. And Torres answered without hesitation. All fleets deployed, Admiral. 10,243 warships, currently operational, additional support vessels still exiting the Europa yards, while the massive holographic map slowly expanded, revealing the true scale of humanity's preparation, because the warships visible to the Council represented only the first operational layer of a much larger military network, including logistics carriers, drone fleets, and planetary defense systems that had been quietly constructed during 40 years of technological development that the rest of the galaxy had never noticed. Back inside the council chamber, the delegates were no longer laughing because the arrogance that had filled the room at the beginning of the hearing had been replaced with a cold realization that humanity had successfully concealed the largest military buildup in recorded galactic history. And as the analysts continued scanning the fleets, new details began appearing on the tactical displays, showing that the human ships were not primitive relics as previously believed, but heavily armored war platforms built around kinetic weapon systems, capable of delivering devastating firepower at extreme range, while Dia Shun activated another projection, revealing the engineering philosophy behind the ships, explaining. With quiet clarity, the human vessels had been designed to survive prolonged combat rather than rely on fragile energy, shields, and that their so-called primitive appearance was the result of deliberate design choices, prioritizing durability, modular construction, and rapid mass production. On over aesthetic elegance, while several alien engineers, watching the presentation, began exchanging uneasy glances because the industrial logic behind the fleet suggested something far more dangerous than advanced technology. It suggested a civilization that had mastered the art of total war production. High Arbiter Vrax finally spoke again, his voice carrying a forced authority that barely concealed the growing tension within the chamber as he demanded that Admiral Cole explain why humanity had deployed such an enormous fleet without notifying the Council. But Cole simply met the Arbiter's gaze across the chamber and answered with calm precision, because for 40 years, the Council studied us, evaluated us, and judged us. And as he spoke, the holographic map shifted once more, revealing a final wave of signals appearing across the outer sectors, pushing the total fleet count beyond 11,000 vessels, while the room fell silent again, because the scale of the deployment now exceeded the combined standing fleets of several major civilizations. And Advisor Kellerith slowly leaned back in his seat, finally understanding the true purpose behind the demonstration, because this was not an invasion force, nor an act of aggression. It was something far more unsettling, a strategic message. Admiral Cole allowed the silence to linger before continuing his explanation, his voice steady and controlled as the massive projection of the human armada glowed above the council table. You believed our ships were primitive because you assumed technological elegance equals superiority. And as he spoke, the tactical map zoomed outward, revealing the enormous network of human fleets, locking into synchronized formation across multiple star systems, while the final deployment signals confirmed that EV, a major hyperspace corridor within human reach, was now under observation by human warships. And Cole finished his statement with quiet certainty. But humanity did not come to the stars to impress the galaxy. We came to survive it. And across the chamber, the delegates slowly realized that the balance of power they had taken for granted for centuries had just changed forever. The silence inside the grand chamber grew heavier with every passing second as the projection of humanity's armada continued expanding across the holographic star map, revealing thousands of warships forming layered defensive rings around key hyperspace corridors and trade routes, while the Council's strategic analysts rapidly recalculated their projections, only to discover that the human fleet was positioned with terrifying precision, because every cluster of ships occupied locations that control at the fastest travel lanes between major civilizations, meaning that if conflict ever erupted, humanity would be able to slow, isolate, or completely trap entire fleets within controlled sectors of space. Wow. Advisor Kellerith stared at the projection with growing unease, because he now recognized the pattern of the deployment not as a threat of immediate war, but as something far more calculated, a demonstration of strategic dominance. And as the realization spread across the chamber, several delegates began quietly sending urgent messages to their home governments, warning them that the balance of power inside the Orion Arm had shifted in a single moment without a single shot being fired. Deep inside the human command network, Captain Elena Torres continued monitoring the status reports streaming from thousands of vessels spread across multiple systems, while the Bridge of Aegis Prime glowed with layered tactical displays showing supply lines, weapon readiness, and fleet synchronization as each battle group confirmed operational status. And Torres watched as the final deployment markers stabilized across the star map, confirming that the Armada was now fully operational, while Admiral A. Dryan Cole's voice returned through the command channel, asking a simple question. Any response from the Council fleets? And Torres scanned the sensor feeds before answering, Negative Admiral, their fleets are holding position, but several Council patrol groups have begun powering weapons. Systems likely precautionary activation, while Cole responded with calm certainty. They're nervous. Could keep all fleets' defensive posture. Only we're not here to start a war. Back inside the chamber, High Arbiter Vrax struggled to maintain control of the meeting as dozens of delegates began speaking. At once some demanding explanations, others calling for emergency council sessions, while several military advisors were already projecting potential conflict scenarios onto their personal consoles, calculating how long their civilizations could survive if war broke out with a force the size of the human armada, while Dr. Maya Chun calmly stepped forward, activating another disc, Lei showing the industrial history behind Earth's fleet expansion, explaining that the construction of the armada had not been a sudden buildup, but a gradual process spanning decades, during which humanity expanded its orbital manufacturing networks, developed autonomous construction, drones, and perfected modular ship assembly techniques, allowing entire warships to be produced in weeks rather than years. And as the alien engineers studying the data realized the scale of the human industrial network our expressions slowly shifted from disbelief to something closer to fear, because such a production system meant that the 10,000 warships now visible were not the limit of human capability, but merely the beginning. Advisor Kerith finally spoke again, his voice quiet but carrying clearly across the chamber as he addressed the Arbiter. High Arbiter, we must consider the possibility that humanity did not build this fleet for conquest, but for deterrence. And the room grew still as the implications settled over the delegates, because deterrence meant that the entire demonstration might be a warning rather than a threat, while Admiral Cole nodded, slightly acknowledging the statement before responding. For 40 years, as humanity has listened to the Council debate whether we are trustworthy, whether we are dangerous, whether we deserve a place among the stars. And as he spoke, the projection shifted once more, revealing the enormous logistical backbone behind the Armada, including support carriers, fuel platforms, and repair vessels, forming a network capable of sustaining large-scale operations for years without returning to Earth. Cole allowed the Council a moment to absorb the scale of what they were seeing before delivering the final message of the demonstration, his voice calm, steady, and impossible to ignore. You believed humanity entered the galactic stage unprepared and vulnerable. And as he spoke, the holographic projection slowly rotated, showing the full extent of the human fleet stretching across dozens of star systems, like a shield protecting the young civilization that had built it. So we decided to show you Summit, hing important before the galaxy makes a terrible mistake. And across the chamber, every delegate watched in silence as the final fleet alignment completed, locking the Armada into a perfectly coordinated defensive grid, while Cole finished his statement with quiet certainty. Humanity does not seek war, but if war ever comes, we will not face it alone or unprepared. The tension inside the Grand Chamber reached a level none of the ancient delegates had experienced in centuries, because the galaxy had always operated under an unspoken hierarchy, where the oldest civilizations commanded the largest fleets and the younger species slowly climbed the ladder of power. But the projection floating above the council table had just shattered that assumption completely, while the human armada continued holding its silent formation across dozens of star systems like an Moose Steel constellation, and the council analysts began projecting the final strategic simulations, showing that even if every major civilization combined their fleets, it would still take weeks to gather enough ships to challenge the human deployment, while during those same weeks, humanity would maintain control of the hyperspace corridors that connected the Orion Arm, effectively isolating entire regions of space from reinforcement and trade. And as the scale of the strategic imbalance became clear, the chamber grew colder, because every experienced military commander in the room understood the same thing at the same moment: the galaxy had underestimated the wrong species. Far from the council chamber, Captain Elena Torres watched the same strategic calculations appearing on the command bridge of Aegis, prime as thousands of Blue Fleet icons held their positions across the star map, while logistics reports confirmed that supply carriers had already begun distributing fuel, ammunition, and maintenance drones throughout the deployment network, ensuring that the Armada could remain operational for extended periods without returning to Earth. And Torres allowed herself a brief moment to appreciate the quiet precision of the operation, because 40 years of hidden preparation had finally reached its intended conclusion, without a single hostile action being required, while Admiral Adrian Cole's voice returned through the command channel, asking calmly, "Any signs of aggression from Council fleets?" And Torres scanned the sensor feeds again before answering. "Negative, Admiral. Most fleets are maintaining defensive formations. Some are retreating toward their core systems." And D. Cole responded with quiet satisfaction. "Then the message is being understood." Back in the chamber, High Arbiter Vrex slowly lowered himself back into his seat, realizing that the tone of the council hearing had changed forever, because only an hour earlier, the discussion had revolved around whether humanity was technologically primitive. And now the question, facing every delegate in the room, was something far more serious: how a civilization barely 40 years into interstellar travel had managed to construct a fleet capable of rivaling empires that had existed for millennia W. Heil Dr. Maya Shun calmly addressed the council, once more explaining that human military development had never followed the same technological philosophy as the ancient civilizations, because while other species pursued increasingly complex energy systems and advanced exotic weaponry, humanity had focused on something far less glamorous: industrial scalability and strategic redundancy, which meant that every ship design could be mass-produced, repaired quickly, and upgraded continuously, allowing the FLE to evolve faster than traditional military doctrines could predict. Advisor Kelrith leaned forward again, studying the final tactical display, and the realization that had begun forming earlier finally became clear to him, because humanity had not simply revealed a fleet, they had revealed a new way of thinking about power in the galaxy. While the ancient civilizations built fewer but more sophisticated vessels, humanity had chosen the opposite approach: overwhelming scale, adaptability, and endurance. And as he watched the projections, he finally understood why the human ships looked primitive compared to the elegant vessels of the older species, because the ships were never meant to impress alien observers. They were designed to win wars of survival. And he quietly addressed Admiral Cole, once more asking the question that now weighed heavily on every mind in the chamber. "If this fleet is only defensive, then why reveal it now?" Admiral Adrian Cole allowed the question to hang in the air for a moment, while the projection of the Armada slowly rotated above the council table, revealing the vast network of warships standing silent across the stars, before finally answering in the same calm tone he had maintained throughout the entire hearing. Because history teaches us something very important, and every delegate in the Hess chamber watched him closely as he continued speaking. "Civilizations often start wars not because they want conquest, but because they believe the opponent is weak. And as the full scale of the human armada remains suspended above them like a warning written across the galaxy itself." Cole finished his statement quietly but firmly. Humanity decided it would be wiser to correct that misunderstanding before anyone made that mistake. The chamber remained completely silent after Admiral Cole's final words, because every delegate present understood the weight of the moment. While the projection of the human armada slowly rotated above the council table, revealing again the staggering scale of the deployment: thousands of warships standing motionless across dozens of star systems like an enormous shield built from steel and fire. And for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council found itself confronting a power that had grown quietly outside its influence, while High Arbiter Vrax studied the projection with a rigid expression, because the political reality unfolding in front of him could not be ignored. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as a minor civilization seeking protection, but as a fully capable military power prepared to defend itself, and the consequences of that revelation would reshape the balance of influence across the Orion Arm for generations. Across the council chamber, the delegates began speaking again, but the tone had changed dramatically from the earlier laughter that had filled the room, because now the voices carried caution, calculation, and in some cases, a quiet respect, while the military advisors, representing several civilizations, studied the tactical map one final time, realizing that the human armada had been positioned with extraordinary restraint because despite controlling critical hyperspace corridors, the fleets had deliberately avoided entering the territorial borders of other civilizations, demonstrating that the deployment had been carefully designed as a strategic signal rather than an act of aggression, while Advisor Kellerth finally spoke again, addressing the council with a calm observation. Humanity has just demonstrated that it possesses the capability to challenge any military force in this region of space, and yet they have chosen not to threaten us directly. And the implication behind his words was clear. His was not intimidation. This was a warning built on logic. Deep within Earth's command network, Captain Elena Torres watched the council chamber feed through a secure transmission channel as the alien delegates processed the reality of the human fleet, while the blue icons representing thousands of warships remained steady across the tactical map, confirming that every formation was holding its assigned position exactly as planned. And Torres glanced briefly at the fleet readiness reports showing perfect synchronization across the armada before turning her attention back to the main display where Admiral Cole stood, before the council delivering the final stage of humanity's message to the galaxy. And although the operation had required decades of preparation, the outcome now seemed almost simple. The council had been forced to see the truth that humanity had prepared for the worst long before the galaxy had begun paying attention. Back inside the chamber, Admiral Cole stepped forward one final time as the projection of the armada slowly dimmed, allowing the delegates to see each other clearly across the circular table, and his voice carried through the room with calm clarity. Humanity did not build this fleet to conquer the galaxy, and the delegates listened closely because every word now carried enormous weight while he continued. We built it because our history taught us that survival is never guaranteed and that peace is strongest when it is protected by preparation. And as he spoke, the holographic projection shifted once more, showing not only the warships, but the colony's research stations and civilian trade networks that humanity had established across its growing territory, reminding the council that behind every military vessel stood millions of ordinary human lives depending on that protection. Cole allowed the final image to linger above the council table before finishing his statement in a steady, controlled voice that echoed through the chamber. You believed humanity was primitive because our ships looked different from yours, but strength is not measured by elegance or age. It is measured by resilience, preparation, and unity. And as the projection slowly faded, leaving the chamber illuminated only by the council's dim lights, the delegates realized that the demonstration had never been about intimidation or conquest. It had been about understanding, while Cole concluded quietly. Humanity came to the stars seeking cooperation, not conflict. But if the galaxy ever tests our resolve again, it will discover something important. And after a brief pause, he finished with the final words that would be remembered long after the meeting ended. We may be young among the stars, but we learned long ago never to face the darkness unprepared. Humanity's greatest strength was never its technology or its fleets, but the lessons carved into its history, because a species that survived thousands of years of conflict had learned that peace does not come from weakness or blind optimism. It comes from preparation, unity, and the willingness to protect what matters most. And as the Galactic Council slowly came to understand the truth behind the silent armada stretching across the Orion Arm, they realized that Humanity had not arrived in the galaxy as conquerors or victims, but as something far more dangerous and far more hopeful. A civilization that remembered the cost of war and had chosen to ensure that no one would ever mistake its desire for peace as a sign of vulnerability again.